Mr. Warren.
Cross-cat blue light.
We had a...
Yeah.
No, we had four. The other one was a copy. So I didn't know. Oh, okay. They moved it along.
Stop it right now.
I heard that tonight. I don't know what it was.
I was down here.
That issue for the
Let's see if you're covered it for WCZZ. Oh, yeah. They're gonna start doing these live, right? On the radio.
I feel.
Is there another
They're
question?
gonna start doing these things live on the radio.
This might be one. He's getting the book, Jim. Jim, he's getting the municipal home rule law.
It's gonna municipal home rule law book to look it out. Surprise.
Okay. Okay.
Closer. This is 40.
After tonight, there's going to be
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I think that is.
Yeah.
Or we should have recognized him. He's not here, is he?
Okay, that's true. What?
There's 1910.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, Marcellus Rally.
We all rise and salute the flag, please. Are there any changes, additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda?
I have one suggestion that possibly, and I know there's a couple of young people in the council chambers this evening, and I think that maybe it would behoove us to move agenda item number 23 and replace that, put that right after number 8. I think those two are going to go together. So we might as well, if we're discussing one, I think the other is going to lead right into it.
Yes, and we have to delete item number 6. We have to get the proper law amended so it's for view of the public. There was just a miscommunication.
And 6 is deleted. Item 23 is moved to 9. I have an item that I need to add, and it concerns the $50,000 grant to replace the floor in the Fulton War Memorial. You do it number 3 or
Sure.
3 is fine.
3?
2 is.
Mayor Bullard. Alderman Lincoln.
Here.
Alderman Taramidji.
Here.
Alderman Weston.
Here.
Alderman Cavallaro.
Here.
Alderman Trowbridge.
Here.
Alderman Allen.
Here.
All present, Your Honor.
First proclamation.
Mr. Weston.
Mr. Weston, you want to...
Yes, before we do the number one item on the agenda, I would like to make a few comments. This week is a very special week in our city. This Saturday, October 7th, one of our residents will be 100 years young, and that person is Miss Marcella Frawley. And I want to introduce some people that are very close to her tonight. Her niece, Mary Lou. I wonder if Mary Lou would stand up, please. Her husband, Jack Garvey. And sitting next to Mary Lou is Mary Ellen Ross, who's our city historian. And she brought this to my attention about 4 months ago. And I want to thank all three of these people for certainly helping make this a special day. I met with Ms. Frawley last week, and I was tremendously impressed at her alertness, her manner. She's a tremendous lady. I spoke to her about a few things. She mentioned that my wife and I had been there about 10 or 12 years ago on something we were working on. And sometimes you say, well, oh yeah, sure, you remember. But then she reiterated a little bit more and passed on a little bit more information, so there was no question about it. She remembered. Also, I have to be on my best behavior tonight because she said that she not only reads about things that are possibly written in the paper, but she also watches the Common Council meeting. So I've got to be on my best behavior for her. This woman is a Fulton treasure. And with that, I would like our city clerk to read the mayor's proclamation.
Proclamation. Congratulations, Marcella Frawley, on the occasion of your 100th birthday, October 7, 1995. Marcella Frawley has, through nearly 3 different centuries, enjoyed a full and healthy life in the city of Fulton on what was known as the Frawley Farm at West First and Curtis Streets. She still resides in the family home, which was the site of tobacco fields and orchards, in a barn full of chickens, cows, and horses. Marcella Frawley demonstrated a love and respect for her family, growing up with her stern but kind Irish parents, with 4 brothers and 2 sisters. She did her share of chores before and after school. She particularly liked to cook and was an avid gardener. Their home was always profusely surrounded with colorful flowers. Her father was manager of the American Tobacco Company warehouse on West 3rd Street, now DK Manufacturing Plant. Mr. Frawley was also Commissioner of Public Works in Fulton in the early 1910s. Marcella Frawley supports her church in all the facets of her religion, attending St. Mary's School, Immaculate Conception, and Holy Family churches. She is the oldest and only surviving charter member of Court Perry Lemoyne at number 833, Catholic Daughters of the Americas, founded in 1921. Marcella Frawley, after graduating from high school, even though all her brothers and sisters pursued higher education, she chose to remain in Fulton and became office manager of J.R. Sullivan's Furniture and Department Store on West Broadway, where customers were treated like family, doing business the old-fashioned way. Many local families furnished their homes on verbal credit, paying 50 cents or $1 a week. Far cry from the present shopping malls with stringent credit cards and telemarketing programs. Marcella Frawley has shown great courage and compassion through the heartbreaks and family misfortunes. Her brother Edward, a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, was killed in an airplane crash while participating in flight training at Pensacola, Florida. She is always helpful to unfortunate people and families in the neighborhood, providing money and assistance, food, and clothing. Marcella Frawley is a joy to all who know her or to those who meet her. Donald W. Bullard, Mayor, City of Fulton.
If I could, I'd just like to add a couple more things. One, the information that was written so well was prepared by Joe Swadolowski, the former owner of the Fulton Patriot. I want to thank Joe for that information. Also, I want to add that there's no question that Marcella could have been here tonight had she chosen to. She chose not to come. She's a very easygoing lady that's not looking for a lot of attention. I asked her about coming tonight, and she said she'd rather not. She said, "What's the big deal?" And we think it is a big deal. And also, of course, I said I have to ask you the question: what do you attribute to your longevity? And she just said, "Keep busy." So I guess that's our words of wisdom to take home. Thank you.
Thank you. First order. Wait a minute, there's one other item. Dave Bullard, who's no relation to me, and asked for just a couple of minutes prior to the start of the meeting.
Good evening. My name is Bonnie Marini, and I just want to make this very brief and to say thank you to everyone. I don't know. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
I just wanted to come here in person and thank everyone on the Common Council on behalf of the Fulton Chocolate Festival Committee. And I wanted to personally thank the mayor for all of his help coming through in the end when we needed it. And I wanted to say thank you to Fulton City Police, who were there every minute and helped us along the way, and the fire department. And I also wanted to say thanks to all of the volunteers at Nestle's that helped to make it possible for all of us to have a very nice family-oriented festival. So I promised to be brief, and I want to just introduce Dave Bullard, who's going to speak for a minute to bring us up to date.
Thank you. As you know, last year we didn't sit down with the good folks in the council and the mayor until perhaps too late. So in hopes of remedying that, we're trying to come too early this time. One other thank you, by the way. As long as John Sullivan's here, I wish he'd carry back to his wife the founding spirit of Harborfest, our thanks, because without their assistance, many of the little things that happened at the festival that no one ever saw, many of those little things went right because the folks at Harborfest opened their doors and provided invaluable assistance. With that in mind, we want to let you know that the plans are underway for Chocolate Fest 96. We are planning to, as we promised, bring some sort of an Indian cultural presence there. We're working on that. We are looking for ideas for using Lake Neotawanta, a tremendous resource. It's beautiful, and we've got to find some way to integrate that into our plans. With that in mind, and the mayor knows this because we've discussed it, those plans all hinge upon resources. Last year, the festival's books will probably close with a deficit of about $2,000 from a combination of factors on a $55,000 budget. That's fairly substantial. We have taken some steps to address that, to get rid of those things that didn't work, and some of them were non-recurring costs involved in putting the festival there. And we've also retained some help. One of the other Harborfest guiding forces, Mary Abracados and her firm, helping us look for money. So we're planning to continue what we've done last year and continue to make this the single best family-oriented festival in upstate New York with your assistance. And we'll be back to talk to you about that at some point in the future. In the meantime, we are open to any of your suggestions. And one last time, just wanted to say thank you very much.
And if I could say one thing, we appreciate you being here, but none of it would have happened without the Department of Public Works.
Quite so. Thanks.
I'd like to take a minute while Dave and Bonnie are together to thank them for all their countless hours and all the volunteers. Please send our thanks back. It was a beautiful festival, and as Bob Weston so aptly put it, stroller heaven. It was nice, family-orientated time. Thank you. It was a lot of hard work.
Next item.
Resolve the minutes of the Common Council meeting held on August 31st, September 5th, September 13th, and September 22nd are hereby approved.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Whereas Senator Wright announced that the City of Fulton would receive a $50,000 grant to replace a floor in the Fulton War Memorial. Whereas the City of Fulton may be eligible to receive a grant based on the submission of an application of the State of New York Division of Veterans Affairs. Whereas the city is interested in attempting to secure a grant for replacement of the floor in the Fulton War Memorial. Now be it resolved that the Recreation Supervisor is hereby directed to complete the attached questionnaire for a grant in aid application to the State of New York Division of Veterans Affairs for said grant pursuant to the letter dated September 28, 1995 from Mr. William J. Brennan, Counsel for the Division of Veterans Affairs.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Whereas the meeting of the council held on September 5th, clerk was directed to advertise for public hearing at this meeting of October 3rd relative to a proposed amendment to Chapter 177, subsection 177-27, entitled Off-Street Parking. The mayor will now declare the hearing open.
Mr. Vaughn?
This proposed amendment is an updating of our existing off-street parking size requirements for the parking and also the number that will be required. Several times this year, this issue has come up relevant to various proposals here in town, and we found that our parking, both spaces, size of spaces, and the number of spaces was totally inadequate. And so this amendment reflects that. This has been to our Planning Commission and also was adopted based on the newly revised recommended procedures of the county. So that's basically what it covers. To give you an example of the need for such a thing, in our old amendment, for example, the existing shopping plaza that we all know up here at the edge of town would have needed twice the amount of parking spaces that are there now, and only 75% are used on the busiest day. So to give you an idea of how far outdated it was and how much need there was. And I'd like to thank the Planning Commission for their effort in this behalf.
Anyone have any comment? Anyone from the council? Declare the meeting closed. The hearing closed, pardon me.
As public and all in attendance have had an opportunity to express their views regarding the proposed amendment, now therefore be resolved that the proposed amendment to Chapter 177, subsection 177-27 is hereby approved as per attached.
Do you want to move that?
I'll move it.
I'll second. Mr. Allen. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Whereas the meeting of the council held on September 5th, the clerk was directed to advertise for public hearing for this meeting of October 23rd relative to a proposed adoption of Section 177-19.1 entitled Screening Device Regulations. Mayor Bullard will declare the hearing open.
Mr. Vaughn again, please.
This proposed amendment is based on the several requests I've had from a large amount of people in town concerning the necessity for having some regulation to the size of fencing and the type and character of it. This has a fancy name called screening devices, but it's really all about fences and shrubs and maintaining them and that type of thing. When this went to our Planning Commission, this particular item was split right down the middle on a vote. It was a tie vote in which 3 were for and 3 against. In this particular regulation, it seems that if you're for it, you want it more restrictive than the existing law, or you don't want it at all. And those are the 2 opinions that basically came up at our Planning Commission meeting. Some people believe we should even regulate the direction in which a fence is placed, which way the face goes. They get that restrictive, and others just don't want any restrictions. I think that what we're proposing here is a beginning and a compromise of that. It basically regulates the height of a fence in the rear yard and also in the front yard, and that being 6 foot in the rear and 4 in the front with 50% opaque. Anyone has any questions, I'd be glad to entertain it.
Mr. Langlois?
Joe Langlois, 30 Moran Drive. How restrictive is this going to be?
Basically, we're talking about restricting the height of fences in the rear and side yard to 6 foot, and in the front yard to being 4 foot, of which has to be 50% open.
So this is going to be, what, a one-page resolution?
Yes, basically, it's about a 3-page resolution because it also addresses existing conditions that they're not covered under this, except where if a fence is moved or if a fence has gotten to a situation where it has rotted and needs to be replaced and the owner elects to replace it, they would then have to replace it in accordance with the new regulations, the existing fence.
So any fencing that does not meet the new requirements until it falls down, you will not be able to address anyways?
Or it's moved. That's the other requirement. There's only 2 requirements which are required to be brought into code at that time.
Is there any reason why the Planning Commission was split on this issue?
Well, I think it gets down to basically there's a concept in America today that we need no more legislation by some people. There's others who believe that reasonable legislation is still a good thing, and they just happen to be split right in the middle on this one.
Thank you, Dan.
Sure. I think this lady had a question.
Alice Sabota, Buffalo Street, 212. About the size, the 6 feet, I think what's important, I don't care about anybody's backyard or front side, but where we drive and there are hedges that come in the corner, I've had a lot of trouble having to extend the car out very far to get beyond the view where that hedge is hiding the oncoming traffic. Those are more important, I think, than people's backyards or anything else. The hedges.
Well,
That's going
it's
to
interesting you should say that. We already have existing legislation which covers hedges on corners. And, I can't speak for what happened before I come here, whether that was enforced or not. But I've seen some corners that have been put in that way. And the regulation is basically from the corner back 20 feet on both sides, you can plant nothing. So basically what you do is you come up to a piece of property like this and 20 foot back, it has to go across this way, the shrub, so that when you're coming to that corner, you can see both ways. That is an existing regulation that isn't included in this.
It isn't enforced, though, because if it's been put in, like you said people don't like restrictions, well, if they're enforced, I'm all for them. If they're not enforced, why make more? Because
Unfortunately, I accepted the sins of all my predecessors when I took this job. I'm sorry about that, but I don't believe anybody's put any in since I've come that I'm aware of that are in violation of law.
Can't these be included, these hedges that are still around? Because they're dangerous, and with winter coming, it's going to be worse.
Okay. This law does not reflect to its grandfathering the existing conditions, except those that were put in during the law. I don't know when the hedge you're talking about. I'm sure you have one in mind someplace.
Yeah, there's several. I probably should have remembered what streets they were on, but I know right now with the conditions of the roads and the way they are, you'll have to really get out, and cars do come by fast. We also don't enforce our speed limits enough, I guess, but those hedges are dangerous, and with winter coming, those are the bad ones. Those are more important as far as I'm concerned. We've got a neighbor that's got a great big fence, and that doesn't bother me at all. It's their fence, fine, it doesn't bother me, but where it involves danger when you're driving, I think that's more important.
Right, well, the front yard setback, or front yard height requirement of our fence, and the fact that it's being 50% open is a safety issue. That's what that's all about. So if you're backing out with your car, you can see some child that might be running up the street. So that is a safety issue. As I said, the previous thing that you brought up is already in law, and if you know of some violation, if you let me know, I'll certainly look into it
I
for
don't
you.
like to be against people who have nice hedges, because I like them myself, but they just shouldn't prevent us from seeing.
Right. That's why this thing was so split all the way. Some people don't believe that we should be controlling those kind of things.
Thank you.
Could you put,
I don't know whether the existing, I can't remember whether the existing law has a height requirement. I know it has a setback requirement, but I don't know if it has a height requirement. I can't answer that question without looking it up.
Mrs. Foley?
If it interferes
Mrs. Foley, the audience can't hear your question.
I'm sorry. If it grows high, now there's one in particular on State Street and 6th, and that grows so high that, like Alice says, you have to go way into the intersection to see.
Right.
Now, that could be trimmed. I mean, I don't see where any grandfather law would affect.
No, under this existing law, that can be trimmed. It has to be 3 foot, can't be greater than 3 foot in height.
But there's several of those around like that.
Right.
Any other comments? Any comments from the council?
I have one. I particularly don't think there's any need for the height in a backyard also. 6 feet, 8 feet, 10 feet, some people want more privacy, some people live on a hill. I don't think that's a problem. I do have there are people that have called me with concerns, especially some places in my ward where the driveway is in a slope, and some people have threatened to put stockade fence up all the way down. So when the people are pulling out of their driveway, they do have concerns for children's on bikes and trikes going by. I think the safety issue in that is extremely important. I also don't believe when it comes to a fence, because a fence isn't a matter of living in it, something that's safety related like electrical, plumbing, building where you're actually going to be hurt. I don't think it requires a building permit. I really don't. I think many people I believe that they go out, they put up a fence, there's an expense there, most of them do it to improve their properties. I really have a problem with that because it's not something that's going to affect your life. But what I see missing in here is specific language that says you cannot, the materials you can use for the fences, like doors, pallets. Did I miss that? Because I know it's happened in the city of Syracuse and in other cities where there's neighborhood disputes and people do that and use pallets, old wood, doors. And I really think that's unsightly. I don't think unsightly is
Okay.
6 foot, 8 foot.
The screening, it says that the devices shall be open design such as chain link, ornamental iron, rail, or picket. I think that pretty well limits that you couldn't put up a door, for example, in that particular area. I mean, no.
It's that specific. I mean, because someone will say it's
Yeah,
not
it is
in
that
there,
specific.
so okay.
In one section here, it's that specific. So.
Okay, I had a concern.
And a
about
definition
that.
of what is a device, you know. In answer to your first question relevant to a permit, a permit is a permission to do something usually based on regulation, and that's how we would know someone would be putting up a fence that would be not in compliance with this. At least we would be reviewing the height requirement and the fact that it is 50% open. So if the first part is important to you, that for relevant to safety, someone should be overseeing that. That's why that permit's there. It's an oversight that we would review the type of fencing and the height that was being put up first, and from there, you know, we would issue a permit.
Well, if the height requirement wasn't the important thing, then the safety issue would be brought to someone's attention, and that would be precluded. You can't have it up there. You would have to measure that on a complaint. But to go over and inspect a fence if there was no height requirement.
Okay.
I mean,
I understand what you're saying.
This is a public hearing, and I just trying to. These are some of the concerns that have been brought to my attention.
Okay. I would agree with you. If the law was more, as the law becomes more restrictive, there is more necessity for oversight. Mm-hmm. For example, if this particular ordinance discussed distance from property lines, mm-hmm. where the fence would be should be placed and was controlled, that a survey was required prior to putting up a fence. Mm-hmm. If it was that restrictive, it definitely needs oversight.
Right.
You might be right here. We could just let it go and not have a permit if you so desire, and then based on complaints, we would enforce.
For the safety.
We would enforce the rest of the law. It does have a provision for a permit that could be removed if you so elect. I have no problem with that. The main concern here was that we would do some oversight, and we
Right.
would anyhow.
I believe that's needed.
Right. The only thing I'm hoping to get is paid for our work, but.
If I may interject here, this is a historic day, and not because we have reached a verdict on the O.J. trial, but because I am in agreement with Alderman Trowbridge on this issue. My objection goes to item K in this, and this is the building permit. I have a fundamental problem when I, as a property owner, give up my right to the city to build a fence, and then the city sells that right back to me in a form of a permit fee. So I would prefer not that permit clause be in there.
That the permit, yeah. I would agree. I have no problem. I told her I have no problem with that being removed.
This is probably one of the reasons why you shouldn't even be considering this. If somebody builds a fence without a permit and is in violation, what do you expect the city to do? Sue that individual for the removal of that fence? I mean, you're opening, and he's shaking his head, yes, you're really opening a can of worms here. If you're not going to go through a permit process, then quite obviously, once the fence is built, what are you going to tell the individual who may well unknowingly have violated these quote-unquote new laws?
They would have to be cited relevant to the law as it stands, and it would end up in court.
And then
I
they
would guess,
be-
John. Am I right on that, John?
I think the issue you're talking about, Joe, we're talking about is a fee.
Yeah, that's what I was.
A permit.
I was going to ask, apparently you're not suggesting that we not have a permitting process, you just don't want a fee for it. Without a permitting process, I don't know how you would determine
How would you
what's
regulate it?
grandfathered and what isn't.
Oh, that's,
Or
And
when
how do you
something
pull a
was rec-
permit without applying for
Yeah.
a fee? See, you're getting into some real problems. That's probably why your planning commission was split on this issue. Regulating fencing is a nightmare. You don't deal with any pre-existing conditions, and all you do is penalize somebody who might very well be trying to upgrade their property. Thank you.
well, then how, John, could we deal with safety issues like this without this kind of a law? Because there is concerns that people's view with bushes being planted high. I probably have had 5 phone calls, which may not be a lot, but these people have to pass this every day. It's a safety violation to them every time they pass it.
Well, we're talking about height issues generally.
Right. Yes.
And you're telling me that there is currently
In the
an
front yard.
ordinance which restricts the height
Not the height.
corners.
It just the how plants or how shrubbery can be planted on a corner piece of property. In other words, there's a setback requirement.
Okay, but there's no
Okay.
height requirement.
Not to my knowledge.
This provides a height requirement.
Yes,
But
it
it would
does.
be prospective in nature.
Yes, it is.
My answer to you is, this is not going to address that issue.
Right. Well, that's what I wanted
This
to-
is actually an ordinance which just happens to have a permit application to go put up a fence. If you don't want a permit application, we pull it out. We still enforce all ordinances, so it doesn't matter. We'd still enforce it.
But wouldn't we have to do additional, since we only deal with corner lots? Wouldn't we have to deal with, I'm talking to lots within a block, and this happens to lots within a block. If someone wanted to put an 8-foot stockade fence up, all the way down their front yard,
Right.
to the front grass, which is part of our right-of-way and part of the site, onto the sidewalk, right up to the sidewalk.
Okay.
If someone's pulling a car down, they're not going to be able to see kids going back and forth. That's my greatest concern.
Okay. If this ordinance existed without the clause of the permit fee, I could enforce it just as you're speaking, because that is regulated. Okay? It's regulated, front yard set for a front yard, 4 foot high, 50% open. And it has to be of the type that I mentioned, ornamental, chain link, picket with 50% opaque area. So 50% of the picket's removed is what basically it is.
Okay.
Any other comments?
I have a couple. I can speak from experience. Just recently, my daughter and her husband installed a very attractive fence on Patrick Drive, and my next-door neighbor put up a very attractive fence, which makes my property look even better. But they didn't have any guidelines at all, so they asked me, and then I talked to the Code Enforcement Bureau, and what they used was They've been working on this for quite some time, so they use these type of regulations, and I think properly we'd have to have some kind of guidelines in order to maintain a consistency of our screening and fencing. I also think the permit, it does exactly what Mr. Vaughn says. It just gives the permission part of it, and I think you have to have something where the person requiring the fencing or the screening has to make some kind of contact with the city so that they can get these kind of regulations put into place. Now, if that does not require a fee, but yet requires some kind of education, I guess, as to what you should do, I think that's important.
I would like to make another comment. I agree 100% with that comment that was just made. It is much easier for me as a code enforcement officer to review a plan prior to construction than to go on a construction site for a person who doesn't have a permit and I've not reviewed it and find out that it's in violation of some law and I then have to challenge them on it. That's really, I mean, what a permit's all about. It has a review process. It allows me to stop a job that's underway that's not being done correctly, and it gets a certification. It allows me to issue a certification for that fence when it's done, so that the person knows that it's done and he's protected. So it does serve a big purpose for me, and I agree 100% with his conclusion on that. And my personal opinion is we really need that if we're going to really have an effective ordinance.
Mr. Vaughn, while you're standing there, should this local law be passed, suppose you tell us if somebody is in violation what the penalty would be.
Local law penalty, I believe, is $500 or $250 a violation. I'm sorry. This would be a violation of zoning. That'd be section 17726, the end of that chapter. I don't know what number that would be. I believe is zoning.
While he's looking that up, I think this is another case of, and we can only look to the fire department, the police department, and saying that prevention is the best cure. I think if we can educate people as to what they should do, we're not necessarily interested in going out and having people put up things and then finding them and say, oh, it's $250. I don't think that's what it's all about. We're not trying to make this a revenue income type of thing. We're just trying to put some kind of guidelines out there so that we can have a consistency in our city.
And the other thing is, too, Jim, is just because I notify somebody with a notice and orders doesn't mean they're going to pay a $250 fine.
No, I just
it's a court decision. It would be a jury decision.
Exactly.
I mean, it'd actually go to court. And
no, that was my question. If someone was found in violation.
I think it's $250, but I'm not sure.
If I've got the right section, 17734, penalty
Okay.
for any offenses under the ordinance
Okay.
would be a $100 fine
Okay.
or imprisonment for 1 day, or both.
Okay.
Now, this is if someone doesn't even know that there's a fencing restriction.
That's why I said it. You really got to go.
You got to know.
You're talking about a court case here in order to get imposed with a fine.
Know.
So the person comes in and says, I didn't know, to the judge. Yeah. Guess what's going to happen?
Right, so
And he's going to be dismissed.
something has to be put in place, so
compliance.
they have to, I would think, apply or
Right.
make some kind of, you know, as I say.
That's one of the things that we like as much as possible, and that's where if people know that it requires a permit to get it, that eliminates that, usually that I don't know, you know. And then when we go out and somebody's building one, and we say, did you know you needed a permit? And they say no, we say, well, then would you please get one, because it is required by law. So.
And I think this falls in line with the fact that the thought that if you are to construct something, you need a permit or a permission to do that.
I agree, 100%.
It's council's pleasure to amend that law to eliminate the fee for the building permit.
Since it was a public hearing, I'd like to hold this. I do have another question on the feet we're hiring. If we're going to have this, and I understand some of those reasons, I'd like time to think, but I think 6 feet is a little bit restrictive, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. I'd like just one more month to ask more questions, because I had a few phone calls. I just need another month.
I think some of us are struggling here with this also, and I would move to table this to the next meeting.
Motion to table, is there a second?
I'll second it.
A the motion to table, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I'm in between. Can you say you're in between?
Yes. I'm in between too. I need
I'd
some.
rather not table it, but if that's what you'd like to do to get more information, that's fine.
No rush.
Bring it back for the November
9.
November
Yeah.
9th.
Okay.
Declare the hearing closed. Read the next resolution, please.
There's a meeting the council held on September 5th. The clerk was directed to advertise for public hearing for this meeting of October 3rd relative to proposed amendments to sections C-151 and C-152, Title 8 of the City Charter, entitled Bureau of Code Enforcement. The mayor will now declare the hearing open.
Before I open the hearing, my understanding is that this just brings in the language which is already in effect. This just brings in the language into the charter of codes and ordinances that are in effect already. I'll declare the hearing open. Any comments? Any comments from the council?
No.
Declare the hearing closed. Please read the resolution.
Be resolved that the proposed amendments to the sections C-151, 152, and Title 8 of the City Charter are hereby approved, or is per attached.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved, the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to advertise for a public hearing to be held at a special meeting council held on Thursday, November 9th at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the municipal building regarding a proposed local law which would amend Chapter 263B of the Fulton City Charter.
I think we wanted to pull that.
No, we wanted to
No, we
pull
pulled the
the
other
garbage billing, Your Honor. This is for the eliminating the steps.
Oh, okay. All right. On the motion, did somebody offer it?
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second. I have a question. 263B, what's the title?
It's titled Garbage, Refuse, Recyclables.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second here.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
This meeting of the council held on September 5th. The clerk was authorized to advertise for this meeting of October 3rd relative to a proposed local law which would establish guidelines for the use of play vehicles. Mayor Bullard will declare the hearing open.
Before I open the hearing, I want to make a couple of comments. And the comments are this. This was done with the interest of public safety. It was fairly straightforward. Every person on this council has had problems with particularly inline skaters in the highway, in the street. And Chief Stafford, if you want to talk about what this will do for you, please come forward.
The police department has received numerous complaints also in regards to the safety issue of the inline skates. The proposed law has been reviewed by both myself and Captain Allen, and the only addition we requested was under the penalties that the police are authorized to impound any play vehicle until the parent or guardian responsible for any minor under the age of 16 using a play vehicle in violation of this local law appears at the police department with the minor to have the skates returned to them, so they're aware of what the situation is. In review, it appears that this is just trying to make the streets safer, not only for the inline skaters, but for pedestrians and for the driving public.
Could you tell us why you need to impound, please?
Under the fine section for penalties, that would be just a violation. If a person is under 16 years of age, they cannot be prosecuted in criminal court. They have to go to family court, and family court is so overloaded, they will not handle any violations. It has to be at least a misdemeanor to get a case into family court. So this could be handled locally without having to go through any court.
So this, what you're really attempting to do is just, if someone obstructs traffic or is found in violation of the ordinance, you would take the skates and have the parent come down and reclaim the skates, the skateboard, or the bicycle, whatever.
Yes, we have been doing that under the 1979 ordinance for down in Canal View Mall with skateboards.
Okay, I'll declare the hearing open. Please come forward, state your name.
Pete Tambroni. The only thing with that is some kids out there skating, and you impound his skates. Kid's got to go home barefooted. He walks home and steps on some glass or causes some type of injury. This is a little ridiculous. I mean, you can fine him or something. They could get hit with or without skates on. I think the injury part, there should be some other way to resolve it. And I'm in favor of some type of curtailing, but to take away the skates on the spot, I question that.
I think what you'd do is you'd ask them to ride down to the police station and take their skates there.
I'd like to add one more thing, please.
So people can hear you?
In response to that, the police are not going to be on patrol looking for kids on skates and skateboards and grabbing their items and making them walk away. If we have a persistent violator or an uncooperative violator, that will be the only means for us to deal with them. It's not going to be every individual that we come across that's in violation of this local ordinance. And that's what you have to remember. We're not out there, our major function is not to chase kids with skates and skateboards and that kind of thing. We're there to safeguard them, make sure that they're safe, make sure that everybody else in the city is safe and their rights aren't violated.
How would you answer Mr. Tambroni's concern about...
Well, certainly if the kids are a block away from the house, I don't think that they're going to be in any harm's way. But if they're across town, we're going to see to it that they get home safely. That's our major job out there, is to protect the citizens and the kids. It's not to put them in any jeopardy whatsoever.
So if I understand you correctly, that no minor would be left out by the side of the road, shoeless.
No, certainly not. And again, it's not going to be every instance. We're going to be there to educate them and tell them what they did wrong and say, please don't do that, get out of the middle of the road. If they say, you know, we're going to do it anyways, then they're uncooperative. That's the only recourse that we've got. And we need some kind of, if they don't have a consequence, they're going to continue to do it. And we need a tool to make it effective.
I understand.
Okay?
Any other questions? Mr. Langley?
Where will they be allowed to skate? Can they skate on the sidewalk? Do they have to skate in the street? Or is it like a bicycle, you're really not supposed to ride it on the sidewalk, you're supposed to ride in the street? Or is it that entailed? Where will they be allowed to use their play vehicles?
It will be the same circumstances as a bicyclist. You can ride on the side of the roadway with traffic. You can ride on the sidewalk. You can't do more than 2 abreast. You can't do it in such a manner as to cause a hazard for yourself or someone else. You can't be exiting a driveway without stopping and making sure there's no traffic or pedestrian that you may harm. It's the same simple rules that bicyclists are supposed to abide by.
Typical with a bicyclist, when you're riding a bike, you have road reflectors and you have built-in safety devices on a bicycle.
Right.
Is there a night requirement or some type of...
There is in this proposed ordinance where they're required, if it's after dark, to wear some kind of reflective material. Mm-hmm.
Because most of the problems that I've seen have been not necessarily improper riding, but you can't see them.
Right.
Thank you.
This has been addressed.
Anyone else?
I've gone with traffic and got...
Could I get your name?
Oh, Ken Spalding.
Thanks, Ken.
I've rode with traffic and got pulled over. He said that you can ride with traffic on the road, but I've gotten pulled over riding on the side of the road next to the curb, going with traffic, and on the sidewalk.
Well,
What, excuse me, what did he say to you? What was the reason he stopped you?
Just for rollerblading in the road.
I can't answer that. We'd have to address each case individually. But not only are the residents going to get educated, all of our officers will be educated as well as to what's allowed and what's not allowed. Because it's new to everyone.
perhaps it's a misunderstanding, Ken, that the police department will clear up, because
Mike Bartholomew. What is reflective clothing?
Wait.
Well, again, the council members are the ones that drew up this ordinance, so I would have to read it off. I wouldn't take part in it. If I may, I'll just read it off if it will assist you. Excuse me. In section 4, excuse me, section 5.
3E.
Is it 3?
Yeah, I have my finger on it. It's just a short paragraph. I'll read it for you, Captain.
Okay, you have a different copy of that.
Yeah. Reflective clothing will be defined for the purposes of this local law as any shirt, vest, or jacket, or any other readily visible piece of apparel equipped with a reflective surface. So anything that you are wearing, you must have something reflective.
So I would think that would include the skates too. I mean, I think it could.
What if you're wearing red or white?
Wear anything you want, but it must have something reflective.
Well, that might be confusing. I mean, would we distinguish? I mean, if you had a piece of tape across the back of your skate, would that be, I mean, I would make my kid wear a light-colored clothes, like a white T-shirt. That's reflective to me if a light hits it. I don't think you have to put your tape all over your body. Probably would be smart to put reflective tape on your skates. You could do it cool. But a white T-shirt is considered reflective.
Is it?
I
don't know.
I didn't take part in this.
No.
Whoever in the
Right.
council drew this up, if they want to revise that, that's fine.
The ordinance has a distance requirement, and as long as you meet that distance requirement of how reflective is your clothing, I see a light-colored sweatshirt over in the corner. That may well conform to this ordinance. He's next, but what I'm saying to you is, as long as it's visible, not less than 300 feet when directly in front of the lawful beams of headlights on a motor vehicle. And it says, which shall be visible from a distance of not less than 50 feet and not off to the side and 300 feet in the headlights of the vehicle. It's reflective. So if somebody can view you that far away, that is a reflective garment.
Richard Scott, Seneca Street. These young gentlemen, I hate to see them cooped up. I said this before. I think we got enough rules and regulations on the law for pedestrians that are moving out there, but they also got to grow up and learn where their responsibilities are. And it's not only in young people, it's in adults. It's not only line skates, skateboards. Some adults I see out there, bicycles are illegal. They're riding double. I see people that they run in the middle of the road. They're doing the same thing these boys are not doing. And, well, they could be girls too. Now, we can set up rules and regulations, start teaching them in school, let them read off what the rules and regulations are. Once they sit down, you give them the guidelines, and let's take each case as they should be. You don't want them downtown in the afternoon when the streets are full. You wouldn't want them on the bridges when between 3 and 6 o'clock at night, you could hardly walk across it. You don't want them at the fairs that we have. There should be regulations that they got to grow up to and understand. So if they don't want to be restricted, let them live by the rules of the whole public. This way we wouldn't have to restrict them.
Thank you. This gentleman had...
Ron Kressler. I would just like to say that if we can't be skating like in the downtown area, like Canal View Park, I'd just like to have like a spot set away for just rollerblading. Like so we're not in traffic or we're not disturbing anybody, just so that we can skate and have fun.
Right.
You can rollerblade any place right now, except the next thing we're going to talk about is the downtown mall. Corporal Barrett Drive over along the lake is a nice paved street that could be used by rollerbladers. There's no restriction. Whether the council at some point wants to designate an area for rollerblading is an issue that perhaps the council would want to work on.
Sure. Would you guys be willing, because we would like to, I know we tried to open up the War Memorial, and we know we've talked to enough kids, they say it's boring going around in circles, and I think maybe we need to work together, because I know you guys are interested in doing flips and stuff, and we have to work with attorneys because that's a liability issue. But there may be some place in the city that we can do, or maybe somebody out there would open up a roller skating rink, because I think it's wonderful. And, I think you guys are having fun, and most of the time kids are good. But I've heard of kids skating down, I won't mention streets, but a hilly area, playing chicken across 2nd Street right into the downtown area. We've seen it. It's frightening. We don't want anyone to be hurt. The purpose of this law, and most of these laws concern kids of your age, obstructing traffic. It's just smart to wear bright white clothes. It's smart to put some tape on your back. If you want to wear a black shirt, go ahead, put some tape on your shirt. We do want to work with you, but downtown area is getting to be very dangerous. And I think if you guys stick by the rules, I don't think there'll be any problem. We just don't want you to do some of the dangerous things that have been happening.
Yeah, but like when we go downtown, we rarely skate. We just usually sit around and talk. We don't really hurt anybody, but the cops still come down there and kick us out of there because we're not supposed to be down there.
Well, let me just, and this is what we have to work on. I've been down there and I've seen kids flipping over the planters. I mean, it's unbelievable, and they're very talented, but it's a very dangerous place to do it, downtown. We've gotten concerns from patrons that go into some of the restaurants and stores down there. They're petrified of being hurt. I feel it's dangerous, but I think we can talk, and I think we can find some things or some places, or maybe you guys can give us the ideas, because we don't know what to do. The War Memorial just didn't work. We did try, and if you had any ideas, please come to us. We will work with you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Sir, your first name was?
Ron Kressler.
Ron Kressler.
Ron, as a member of the Recreation Committee, I have been working with the Recreation Director, Barry Ostrander, to set aside some area of land that if it comes time that the people such as yourself would like a spot set aside, that we will do that. And if I can get your address and phone number, maybe you would like to sit in on some of these meetings.
All right, you want me to give it to you now?
Well, sure.
8.5 Center Street. You want my phone number?
That's fine. Well, if you want, I can get it later. You probably wouldn't want to broadcast it.
All right.
Any other comments? Any comments from the council?
One more.
I think you have a hand.
Someone else have their hand up over here?
Yeah. Ken's calling again.
Ken.
About rollerblading on the side of the roads and the sidewalks. If we get close to the curbs, there's a lot of rocks and everything, so that means we have to walk. And the sidewalks, they got big gaps in it, so we have to get in the grass and walk. So we can't rollerblade anywhere.
Okay.
If I could, just in respect to what Ken said, the local law addresses basically common sense. It talks about unlawful activities. It says that you should not be operating in a careless manner without due caution and circumspection. You shouldn't be endangering in any manner or creating a risk or danger to any person or property. You shouldn't be operating your rollerblades in any manner to impede or interfere with pedestrian or vehicular traffic. You shouldn't be in an area where signs are posted prohibiting such activity, and you're not expected to be on any sidewalk, street, or lands which, because of their condition or maintenance, are not safe and suitable for such activity. So hopefully that would answer your question. If it's not something that you should be on, that you can safely be on, then it's not a good idea to be on that.
If there's nobody else, I do have a new concern with this local law that I want to discuss. I sponsored this bill because of my concerns and the concerns of my constituents, and that is for the safety of the operators of these play vehicles, and for pedestrians who walk on the sidewalks, and for the motorists who have to swerve from some of these operators of play vehicles. And it must be clear, the intent of this local law is not to infringe upon your right to operate a play vehicle. We're not trying to infringe on your enjoyment out of this or restrict its operation in any way. That is the reason for this law. The reason it was submitted in its original form, to provide these guidelines that are detailed in this local law. And it's not unlike the vehicle and traffic law of New York State that governs, as Captain Allen said, of the operation of bicycles. Now, I took the time to research this matter and introduced this legislation to the council for their approval to go forward with this. Now, since the publishing of this local law for this hearing, a revision was added to this local law that did not come to my attention until Friday when I got my backup. And that addresses what Captain Allen and Chief Stafford here addressed, was the permission of confiscation of these play vehicles, and that was one of the concerns Mr. Tambroni had addressed earlier tonight. Now, I would like to read some backup material that impacts directly this revision that we're talking about being added to this local law, which we should all be aware of, and I'll just pass it along to the council here, and they could read it. And I would like the attorney to please take special note of this case law. In working with Frank Snyder from your office, I had discussed this prior, and I had hoped that this would not have been included. And here are some copies for any other interested parties. I'll read it very quickly. I don't want to belabor the issue. In People versus Smith, Dutchess County of 1993, the court found that the local skateboard law was unconstitutional because of the type of penalty provisions included in the law. The court did not find that the municipality had no authority to regulate skateboards, only that the penalty imposed was unconstitutional. The local law in this case authorized the police department to confiscate the skateboard for 30 days and only allowed the parent of a child to claim the skateboard. The court found that the confiscation of the skateboard violated an individual's right to due process of law as provided in federal and state constitutions. The law amounted to a taking of property without a hearing. The language was also considered arbitrary and capricious as it discriminated against children without parents. This law also provided, and I'll just read it, that a fine would be assessed for every ticket issued, and that the fine would be doubled upon the repetitious issuing of tickets. The court found that fines could only be based on convictions and not number of arrests, that only a court could levy a fine. Now, based on the above case, municipalities should avoid laws that attempt to confiscate the property without a hearing, refer to parents as the only individuals allowed to retrieve the property, or attempt to levy a fine upon issuance of a ticket without a court appearance, or double fines based on arrest and not convictions. Now, Chief and Captain, I'm not trying to torpedo your position here, and believe me, I understand where you're coming from. But if we have a defective law, I am not in favor of passing a local law that may, in fact, be infringing on someone's due process. And I would ask the attorney if he could give us any opinion he might have with this case law.
Well, I can tell you procedurally that in order for the local law to be enacted, it must be in its final form and on all councilors' desks 7 days prior to its enactment. I am assuming that that is not the case here, and you're telling me you first learned of the amendment on Friday?
Exactly.
Okay. So it's okay to have the public hearing. We've had the public hearing. However, I would advise the council to delay enactment of the ordinance to allow the statutory 7-day period to ensue. In the meantime, I'll be happy to look at this particular section and the case that you cite and see if in any way it may impact on the proposal as would be adopted here in Fulton. I haven't had that opportunity, and I think with the I would assume that this would be held until our next regular meeting.
That's fair enough to me, and I'll so move that we table this local law till the next meeting.
I'll second it. Is the public hearing still open?
I want to declare the hearing closed.
I just want to make a couple comments before you close the meeting. I certainly want to thank Jim for bringing the local law to the council. Previous to that, Alderman Lincoln had expressed some interest in some kind of guidelines, and as well as the other aldermen. And especially was brought to our attention, I think, by Pat Cush on 4th Street, who contacted both myself and Alderman Chemidji, expressing a real concern with safety, and that she had, what she called me 20 minutes to 10 on a Friday night, saying she had just come down the street and there were 4 rollerbladers on one side of the road and 4 on the other, and she was concerned about their safety as well as her own. So I think those kind of things from our people continue to feed us with information that we can carry on to look at these kind of regulations. I also want to mention the fact I had a conversation with Marty Latchett last Thursday. He was concerned about the safety and of rollerblading, and he also suggested that once again that possibly education and instruction was important, possibly rollerbladers that took some kind of an instructional test could qualify for a T-shirt or something to say that they had done that type of thing. I also want to thank Paul Foster, one of our local firemen, who is very actively involved in an organization called CTIP Task Force, of which also Mike Stafford is on, and what they do, they're a bicycle safety subcommittee. And they're concerned with, the CTIP stands for Community Traffic Injury Prevention Project. So he's working on that. And as to be expected, as a firefighter, his concern, as it is with the police department, is prevention, education, instruction. So he was very, had a lot of ideas and suggestions in saying that possibly we could incorporate our bicycle safety along with the roller skating and the skateboarding along with our bicycle safety in our schools. There's no question that the young people in the schools need that kind of education so that they know, and it's obvious from what we're hearing tonight that not everyone is in tune as to should you be on the left side, the right side, against traffic, with traffic. So it's a whole educational process, and I also especially want to thank the young people that are here tonight. Mike Bartholomew, his wife, not yet Mike, his mother called me last night, and I went over to his house and we talked about this. I wanted to show him what was being proposed, and as Alderman Chemidji mentioned right up front, that there was no way, no intention whatsoever to prohibit rollerblading, but yet to establish some guidelines. So I think once everyone realizes that, it's going to be a lot easier to carry on with the type of thing that we want to put in place to protect the safety and the welfare of all of our people. So having said that, and with the stipulation that Alderman Chemidji has mentioned, it certainly looks like we need to look at the penalty portion of this, and then once we get that ironed out, I think we'll have a good proposal. Thank you.
Do we take a vote on that? I don't think so.
It was voted to, a motion and a second to table it to November 9th.
Public meeting hasn't been closed yet.
Pardon?
Public meeting has not been closed yet, or has it been?
Right.
It has been closed, yes.
Okay, that's what I want.
Unless I neglected to do that, in which case I'll declare the hearing closed. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Can I make One brief suggestion. The school district is always in touch with the Common Council. I think maybe it would probably be good if Mr. Ostrander and some of the council people, with a member from the police department, meet over at the high school. You're all there. We could set a date. You all can come in and we'll meet and try to come up with some ideas in the meantime of some places that would be interesting for you to skate. Some places you find is safe. And we'll come meet with you. We'll set up a meeting at the school. I think that would be easier. Want to do that? Okay.
Next item on the agenda concerns the same issue in the Canal View Mall. And Alderman Taramigi has raised the issue of confiscation of equipment, and the old ordinance was to be amended to include skateboards, but it also talks about not confiscation. Neither of these ordinances talk about confiscation, but they talk about impounding. So inasmuch as the old ordinance talks about impounding the skates as well, so too did the ordinance. It did not use the word confiscate. It used the word impound. But inasmuch as this question exists, I think it would be well to
table that.
Table this.
I would so move it. I agree. This would probably come under the same heading of the
table till November 9th. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved, the city clerk is hereby authorized and directed to advertise for the polling place of the city of Fulton for the November 7th general election as follows. I'd like to read these, but I'd like the press to please, if they could, make mention of this in the paper, since the War Memorial building will be the polling place for both the first and the second wards in both districts for the general election. Previously, we had used the Holy Family, but we cannot use the Holy Family School anymore, so all voters for the first and second wards in both districts will vote at the War Memorial Building. Third ward will be Lanigan School, District 1, District 2, Our Savior Lutheran Church, Masonic Temple for the fourth ward in both District 1 and 2. District 1, Ward 5 will be Towpath Towers. District 2, Ward 5 will be Fairgrave School. Presbyterian Church, both District 1 and District 2. And I was informed by the Presbyterian Church, and I informed the Alderman Allen tonight that at the Presbyterian Church for the general election, they called me and told me that we will be able to use the fellowship hall at the Presbyterian Church, which is much larger and will give us better access. So I need a motion to approve those polling places, Your Honor.
I'll move it.
Second.
I have a question on the motion. Can you tell me, are all of these places that are proposed to be used for voting places handicap accessible?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved, the City Chamberlain is hereby authorized and directed to transfer $4,281 from the 1410 clerk account to the 1430.10 personnel account to cover the salary of the employee benefits aide who has been moved from the office of the city clerk to the office of personnel civil service.
You want to move that? Move it. Second?
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved, the city clerk's report for the month of August 1995 in the amount of $11,458.02 is hereby approved, received, and placed on file.
Move it.
Second. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved that Chapter 165 of the Vehicle and Traffic Ordinance of the City of Fulton be amended to read as follows. Section 165-34, time limit permits. B, restrictive parking. C, parking lot number 7, formerly known as Towpath Towers parking lot, starting at the southern end of the lot, the first 30 spaces on each side for a total of 60 spaces for employee parking. Hours of enforcement for restricted time limit and permit use are 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. except Sunday.
Move it.
Second. Second. Mr. Allen. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved that Chapter 165 Vehicle and Traffic Ordinance of the City of Fulton be amended to read as follows. 165-58, Schedule 14, parking prohibited at all times. Delete name of street, Phillips Street, south side, location from West 1st Street, west for 52 feet. Add Phillips Street, south side from West 1st Street, west for 142 feet.
I'll move it.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved that the Police Department is hereby authorized and directed to conduct a traffic study at the 200 block of Cayuga Street regarding parking.
I'll move it. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved that the claims for the 1 through 6 are hereby referred to the city attorneys for his action.
Move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved that the city chamberlain is hereby authorized and directed to transfer $7,774 from the contingent account to the A1440.47 engineering account to cover the cost city share of work performed by the New York State Department of Transportation for the Curtis Street Reconstruction Project Phase 3 construction per correspondence received from the New York State Department of Transportation dated September 12, 1995.
Just curious.
I'm just surprised the date on this thing from 1988,
This might
which
not,
is good for us.
yeah, might not be a final bill.
I think it indicates it isn't.
Pardon?
I thought it indicated this was not a final bill.
Yeah, that's good. You know.
Can we write paid in
says-
full
yeah.
on the check?
This says not necessarily the final bill. After 7 years.
You want to pay it, or?
Can we direct the
How about
chamberlain to
statute of
write
limitations?
paid in full? Check.
You do that. Mark it paid in full.
Somebody want to move it?
Move it.
Second. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
A memo dated September 8th from Commissioner Graham to the city clerk was advised the expenditure of city funds, material, labor, and equipment. Premises located 64 West 1st Street. Janet and Diane Gregory, 3092 Kinbridge Lane, Baldwinsville, New York. Total expenditure by the city was $100. Be it resolved that there is hereby levied against the premises $100. The special assessment become effective immediately. The amount of the assessment plus 24% per year shall be added to the 96 City of Fulton tax bill if not paid in full prior to December 15th. Interest on special assessment shall accrue effective as of the date of this resolution.
This is Mr. Lincoln's favorite property.
Right, and I'll move it.
I'll
Move
second
the-
it.
Wait, did you say move
I'd
the
like to
property?
move it right out of my ward.
Did you move
And
it?
He'd like to
Yes, I
move it.
moved.
He'd like to move it permanently.
Move it east.
The motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I didn't get, who was the second, please?
All of us.
Sure.
Oh, Kathy.
Pick one.
Okay. Resolved that the regular meeting of the Common Council scheduled for Tuesday, November 7th, 1995 is hereby changed to Thursday, November 9th, 1995.
I'll move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved the schedule of bills payable 89 having been audited by the auditing committee of the council is hereby approved.
Move it.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved the chamberlain is hereby authorized and directed to transfer $815 from the contingent account to the various accounts to cover the cost of telephone line connection charges.
Move it.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Resolved the council hereby accepts the proposal submitted by Clowell, Harbor and Associates dated September 28th to perform a hydrological evaluation of information pertinent to the Miller Container Facility and the potential impact on the facility of the City of Fulton at a cost not to exceed $5,000.
The purpose of this study is everyone knows there was a hazardous spill adjacent to the city's municipal well fields a number of years ago. And the Department of Environmental Conservation has issued what is known as their record of decision. We don't necessarily agree with their record of decision in several areas, and there are volumes and volumes and volumes, stacks of technical data on this spill that we don't understand. And the purpose of hiring this firm is to review that data and find out if the cleanup of that site is satisfactory or not satisfactory.
I'll move it.
Second.
On the motion, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
I just want to mention, too, that I'd like to thank Sandy Weston and also the Assistant to the Mayor, Joe Aiello, who have been working on this diligently. Thanks.
Resolved that the City Chamberlain is hereby authorized and directed to transfer $3,115 from the contingent account to the 7220.45 auditorium account to cover the cost of additional improvements to the War Memorial.
Covers the improvements made to the War Memorial and the sign.
So move it. Second.
Excuse me, I didn't, what were the improvements?
The landscaping, the sidewalk, the paving, the curbing, the blacktop plantings, and the sign. Next year. Motion and second. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carried.
Notation that the reappointment by Mayor Bullard of Diane Moore, 217 South 4th Street, Fulton, New York, as Chief Assessor in the City of Fulton, effective October 1st, 1995, to expire October 1st, 2001, is hereby entered into the minutes of this meeting of October 3rd as a matter of record. Resolved that this common council hereby directs the Chief of Police to contact the Oswego County Sheriff regarding the problem of speeding boats on the Oswego River in the City of Fulton, and to request the Sheriff's Department assistance in patrolling the area where these problems exist.
Say, Joe, before this vote, is this possible to make a comment on
Sure.
this proposal?
Sure.
My name is Larry. Excuse me. Larry Martiniano. I live on Forest Avenue, down on the river for the last 16 years. And I, too, have experienced the 50-foot boats, cruisers that have gone by that have caused some damage to my retaining wall, and we've had to make some repairs to that. And what appears to be a simple, straightforward recommendation to increase patrolling, I oppose. And I oppose it because it does nothing to address the real root cause of the erosion problems of any structures along that riverfront. And I'm afraid it's going to do some more damage, unintended harm and restrictions on those of us families who live along the river, who enjoy the river for recreational purposes and for boating and I mean, that's one of the reasons why we moved along the river. And by taking this stance to increase patrolling for the cruisers, for the boats that actually do the damage, we're going to be restricted in our activities, and I feel we're going to be at a burden and at a loss along that riverfront. Now, as a civil engineer, I am aware that most of damage along any waterfront is caused by what's expected when you live along a waterway. And that would be the current, which scours the bottom of any kind of retaining wall that you might have, the wave action of any boats, which you expect to have boats and you expect to have waves coming against that retaining wall. And in addition, you have rainwater that actually comes down from the land side and erodes the retaining wall from the land side. So any design of any retaining structure along the river would have to take into all three of those accounts. And most, I'd say 90% of all structures along lakefronts and riverfronts fail because of a homemade approach taken with trying to build these types of retaining walls. And the root cause of the problem is not what you would normally expect from a waterway. I mean, the waterway is going to be active. You're going to have boat traffic. You're going to have current. You're going to have all those things. By trying to stop that activity or the natural order of things, you're not solving the problem. The root cause is the poor design of the structures, and if you're going to fix anything, as a homeowner, you have to be prepared to build the type of structure that's going to resist that type of normal wear and tear. And if you don't do that, or at least if you have a homemade structure in your backyard, you have to be willing to maintain that and keep that up on a year-to-year basis, which many of the homeowners do. Whenever the water levels drop to a certain degree, we can get advance notice. We make the necessary precautions and repairs to our retaining walls. But by simply thinking that we're going to call the police and we're going to stop all boat traffic on the river and that's going to solve our problem, I think is crazy. So what appears to be a simple solution, yes, we're going to increase patrolling and let's get the sheriff here and we're going to give tickets to everybody on the river, is not going to solve the problem. So I would oppose voting for this item.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry. I would like to comment that first, Larry, thank you very much for your information. It's that kind of thing that we're certainly looking for. I brought this to the mayor's attention based on letters and conversations that I've had with your neighbors, Carrie Butler and West Belcher, Brace Talents, who lives in the town of Granby up farther, and certainly they share the same kind of problem that you were just expressing to us. So I wrote a letter to the mayor indicating that we need to do something, and we're not sure what to do either. In my conversation with him and talking about, because Carrie Butler's thoughts were that speeding boats were causing the wake and that was destroying the shorelines, and that she had lost 5 foot of shoreline over the years. In my comments to the mayor, he indicated that possibly inversely that the larger boats, if they're slowing down, create more of a wake than if they were going at a faster pace. So that's what his thought was. So, you know, I think this was an attempt to get some kind of direction or and direction in what we should do. So I think we, whether this particular resolution is directing to the police department to contact the sheriff's department, but we understand it's a lot more complex than that. So you're saying that more emphasis should be on the homeowner in protecting their property. But obviously some of the people don't necessarily agree with that. I guess they're asking somebody, the city, the state, the Thruway Authority, the police, the troopers, someone to do something about what they perceive as speeding boats causing a wake.
It's always easy to look to someone else to solve your problem for you and to think that someone else is responsible for fixing damage or whatever. But as a homeowner, you have to take responsibility yourself to build and make whatever is necessary. It's a natural waterway. It's subject to natural erosion processes, and unless the homeowner is willing to keep that property up, then it's just going to be subject to the normal wear and tear. Now, as regards to the some of the public articles that were placed in the local paper, when we saw that article in the paper, we called to try to get the opposite side of the story. There's a lot of homeowners on the waterfront that share my feelings, and the paper refused to print our side of the story. So I don't think you're getting the full picture of all of the homeowners on this issue. So that's why I wanted to come down here and share that with you tonight.
Well, that's the importance of listening to
Larry,
more than one
excuse me,
side.
Before you go away, can I ask you, outside of the erosion problem, is there a significant problem with speeding boats, period? And is that of any consequence in terms of safety on the river, in your opinion?
Well, I've lived there a long time, and you do have the crazies on the river, that you're going to get people, and especially on the weekends when you get a lot of boating traffic, and it's mostly the transient traffic, and that's what's concerning me, is that it's the transients that you're having the problems with. And yet, if you have an occasional patrolling by the sheriff, who is he going to see? He's not going to see any transients going by. He's going to see the people who are out there after work and in the evening and enjoying it with their families, skiing. And then if you go by the letter of the law, they're going to say, well, you can't be over 5 miles an hour, therefore no skiing. So I really don't know the real solution. It is a
So you're saying
tough
it's
issue.
restrictive to you as a boat owner?
As a boat owner
that
and
you will not be able
and a resident and taxpayer of Fulton, that I really feel that will be restricted in our normal recreation on the river. When we're really trying to target the large cruisers who send up the 3-4 foot wakes, all right, that come by on the weekends cruising up to the Thousand Islands, and we've been told in the past that we would have to actually spot the boat, get the name of the boat, go to the lock, and have the lock tender actually hold that person in the lock, get the policeman there at that time, and file a charge against that boat, because the boat and the boat owner is responsible for his wake and the damage that his wake causes. Now, that's a difficult process, and we've tried it, and some of the homeowners have tried that and have been successful in actually receiving sums of money from the boat owner right at the lock. So.
I wonder if I could add, I see that John Koski is also in the audience, and he's on Forest Ave. Maybe he has a comment also.
Yes, just moved recently, and I knew once I moved there I would have to take care of my own property. Right now I have a lot of erosion problem. I agree with Larry, it's the larger boats, and I don't feel that more policing is going to take care of that. Those people are on their way from Florida to the North Country. They could care less. A fine is nothing to them. To decrease our activity, I believe the Thruway Authority just put a lot of money into the area as far as trying to bring about boating. As far as the articles that were written by a couple of other people, when you put the pencil to it, Mrs. Butler had lost an eighth of an inch a year, which is minimal. And I looked at Wes Belcher's property also, and he had talked about having riprap put in the area, and according to the article and the stones that I saw, they were like number 3 stone, which is not riprap. So you really have to take care of your own property, and I really don't feel that policing is the answer. Thank you.
Well, I know recently they had, you used to be able to put railroad ties, and they no longer allow that because of the environmental impact on the river. So. Well, obviously we're hearing different things on this particular resolution. As I said before, I brought it to the mayor's attention and put it on the agenda as a direction to go in. If passing this resolution does nothing constructively, then perhaps at this time I could
withdraw the
either withdraw the resolution or table it until we can get more input on what will be the most effective way to deal with this.
Well, my thoughts on this, frankly, is I'm wondering why we're doing a resolution anyhow. This would seem to be a simple administrative process. The police chief would pick up the telephone and call the sheriff and request assistance and follow that up with a letter. I don't know why we would need a resolution to do this. But the gentleman I would yield to, he spoke eloquently on this. He is a civil engineer. And welcome to our community. I'm glad to see we do have engineers that do live in this community. And I would yield to his knowledge. He would know far better than I on this issue.
You want to withdraw the...
Yes.
Withdrawn. You don't need a vote. Just never been moved or seconded. Didn't need to.
I'm most impressed with the statement, owners must take responsibility. It's refreshing.
Next item.
Yes.
Which withdraw? I'll explain the next resolution. The next resolution is a couple, 3 pages in length, so we're not going to attempt to read it. I'll try as best I can to give you the history on what this resolution, where this resolution came from, and what it means. When the sewage treatment plant was built in the late 1980s, the city borrowed, I believe it was some $8 million. And at the time, interest rates were high. They borrowed the money at around 7.3%. The time that those bonds were issued, the bonds were what's known as non-callable bonds. The city cannot pay those bonds off early without making the entire payment on the bond as though it were paid to maturity. There is a state revolving loan fund which comes from a federal revolving loan fund, which up until recently did not provide for existing sewage treatment plants. It only provided for new constructed sewage treatment plants. And what this program does is it permits us, through the state of New York, we file an application with the state of New York, and we borrow money at a low interest rate. The interest rate is 3 to 4%. We borrow enough money so that the state has adequate principal to reinvest this money in things like treasury bills at 6% or 6.5%. And they manipulate these figures each year using the interest income from the low-cost bonds to offset the higher interest expense on the sewage treatment plant. The conservative projected savings could run as high as $100,000 to $150,000 a year on interest expense on the sewage treatment plant. That is the resolution, plain and simply. The package was put together through Mr. Aiello, Mr. Laboda, and Mr. Shahadi, our bond counsel. It is an effective way to reduce some of the costs of the sewage treatment plant, and that's what this is about. Could you come to the microphone, please? Yes.
I presume what you're asking about is, what you're talking about is the sewer tax that we're putting on our water bill? Is that going to affect that?
No, it isn't going to affect.
It won't affect that, even though you have less to pay every year?
The sewage program in this city currently runs about $300,000 in the red.
Well, this is the same thing that was done when they were forced to put in the sewage plant, right? Isn't this the same thing you're talking about?
No.
Well, what's this new one?
This is a grant that the state of New York would give us to offset the interest expense on the plant that we have right now.
That's the plant, that $7 million plant that was put in. Well, that's what we pay when we pay our water bills, that we add that, which is a horror. I wish we could get rid of that. My little $20 water bill has got $60 sewer tax, and that's ridiculous. So if they could do something to lower that, that would be a great state thing. I don't care who's in, Republicans or Democrats.
Although I don't think you should draw the inference here that your sewer bill is going to go down from this. Do not draw that inference.
Just like to know which agency of the state is doing this.
New York State Revolving Fund for Water Pollution Control.
Is this part of UDC, Joe?
Pardon me?
Is this part of the Urban Development Corp?
No.
Don't believe so.
No, okay. Is the term of this loan tagged to the same maturity of the bonds on the... Okay, thanks.
The Environmental Facilities Corporation of the state. No other comments? Savings will start to offset some of the red ink that you currently have in your sewage operation. Someone want to offer it?
Yes, I'll offer it.
Mr. Allen?
I'll second it.
I have a comment. And I don't want this to be taken negatively, but the last meeting I brought up a resolution, and I was reminded by Council President that resolutions cannot be added to the council after Friday. I am this moment setting eyes on this resolution, and you're asking me to refinance $7 or $8 million without no knowledge of what is in this.
No, this is an application.
Well, an application to move forward, and I think I have the right to sit down and review this more than just a minute or two.
Can I say something here? I've been at several meetings about this, and if I understand this correctly, the city was given a high priority in terms of its potentiality to obtain funds under this program. That's very good news for the city of Fulton and for the people who pay the sewer use tax. The history here is such that we went to the bond market at a time when interest was very high, and they're non-callable bonds. This is kind of a door or a window of opportunity, if you will, that will help lessen the burden on everybody. It's probably not going to reduce the actual sewer tax bill, but it certainly will have an impact on narrowing the deficit at which you are operating and thereby forestall any increase in the sewer use tax. So this is an application. This is competitive too, if I understand it correctly. In other words, other communities will be seeking to borrow from this revolving fund. The fact that we were notified that we are given, 88, Joe can explain this part of it, that we were given a high number or rating in terms of
funding for this program is a score of 50 points. We scored a 98 on this funding, which puts us in a priority position. It gives us some standing on the application. We're under a deadline here.
Right.
The deadline is October 14th. The program became available. We were able to include ourselves and were made aware of it by the state people as of, I believe it was 2 or 3 weeks ago when I had to make a trip into Syracuse to a meeting in regards to this. The application, the pre-application, which got the approval, was submitted prior to that. The application we knew as of about 2 or 3 weeks ago had to be in by October 14th. This resolution has to be passed in order for us to take advantage of this and see the savings.
I understand, and that is the reasons why we have special meetings, so you can call. We've had special meetings in the past to discuss materials such as this. And in your advisory capacity, Attorney, I'm wondering if you're asking me to rubber stamp a resolution.
No. I'm simply
now,
pointing.
That is my question.
No.
here,
I'm simply pointing out what I believe to be the nature of the resolution. That is, it would authorize the city to apply. I just thought perhaps I could help to amplify what this entails and how important this is for the city of Fulton, at least in my understanding.
Well, you are cognizant of the fact that this will get passed, but I'm just raising the issue that I need more time.
I guess the
than
question
30
would be,
seconds.
if you don't act to take this chance to get the money, what impact would that have on the taxpayers? That's obviously a concern too.
I'd like to know that.
I'll second it.
Already did.
No, okay.
Got a couple.
We got a couple.
As part of your capital improvement plan, there were some items that needed to be repaired down there. Is it possible to borrow more than your outstanding debt?
No, absolutely not.
So you're basically only allowed on this fund to reduce the interest rate that you're currently paying on debt that you currently have?
That's correct.
That's right.
Thank you.
Simply put, it's refinancing,
Yeah,
basically.
basically, it's an opportunity to lower your costs.
An opportunity to lower the interest cost.
Understanding that this is an opportunity to refinance, and the city knew about this 3 weeks ago, I think getting to Jim's point, the only question would be, A, why did nobody find out about it, or at least Jim not find out about it until Friday when this information was available 3 weeks ago? And
Correction,
secondly,
tonight.
Oh, tonight. And secondly, since he just did now find out, is there any way to have a special meeting between now and the 14th to give the other aldermen, who I'll assume also just saw it tonight, a chance to review it?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I will. So.
First of all, I think I personally, and I think some of the aldermen here, place a certain amount of trust in Mr. Aiello, our city attorneys, Mr. Sullivan, and I'm sorry, who was the other gentleman that worked on this with you? John Sahadi and Jim Laboda, that they're giving us the best advice possible. And there are times, and I don't think there was anybody excluded for any particular purpose, and this isn't a rubber stamping, the term was used. This is good business. Simple. Plain good business.
But couldn't that have
and it's
been...
based on, excuse me, it's based on trust. Simple as that.
On that note, since the information was available from the entrusted three, is there a reason why it wasn't passed out for...
Excuse me.
That's why I can't understand.
You're taking literal, exactly what, you're taking a literal meaning from something I said. We learned about the process 3 weeks ago. The application was completed Friday afternoon.
Okay.
John Shahadi made it to the city to complete the application here. We spent Friday afternoon working on that application and completing it.
Okay, but the way you had worded it, Joe, was that you found out about this...
My mistake. I'm sorry. I'll be a little more, I'll try to be a little more.
But to help me out a little, if we knew about this 3 weeks ago, it certainly would have been nice for me to be aware or on board with what is going on here.
I'm not sure how we went about the whole process. And again, there was no intention to leave anybody out. And this is an application. We're not asking you to vote on anything other than to go through, support it with a resolution so that the state knows the city is serious about it. If it comes to that time in the process at a later date to accept, to go through with the rest of the process, I think if you've got any problem, you could detail it at that time as well. So it's not a commitment that's going to take you to your grave.
Mr. Walsh.
My name is Donald Walsh. I live at 51 East 10th Street. And from what I can understand from this, right now, people look at...
I take exception to that, and I would ask the council, or the mayor, to call this man to order.
I'm sorry.
I don't need to hear remarks such as he muttered over there.
I'm sorry, I didn't even hear
Excuse
it.
me, Mr. Walsh.
that with these variable rates that people have to pay, fixed rates, and I know about these things you're talking about when they had these in the bonds. And I think what they're trying to do here is to help the people with these fixed rates, and borrowing the money will help the thing right along. I can't see where these rates that you have to pay in these bonds should even bother anybody to go to a fixed rate and pay the way they should.
Thank you.
That's all I've got to say.
Thank you.
Personally, I think the hour's long and the tempers are getting short. I don't really care who takes credit for this. I'd like to thank the individuals that worked hard to find out about this program.
Absolutely.
Obviously, this is a certain way to save the city, which you people are all concerned about, some monies, which in effect, unfortunately, might not lower our tax bill per se. We certainly realize that won't happen, but but it certainly does help benefit us all. And obviously, some things happen during notification processes. Certainly, maybe that's something that the council should be working on together, but I would certainly like to thank the individuals who found out about this program. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a few comments also. In responding to Jim's comment on the addition of items to an agenda, in theory, of course, this is what we attempt to do all the time. In reality, sometimes the time frame doesn't permit that to happen. And I don't think, as long as it's something that does not require a vote that night that will affect expenditures, this happens to be something that is practically it's a win situation type of thing, and for us to even consider not approving a grant application doesn't make sense.
No one, and that's including myself, was not willing to consider a grant application that was not the focus of my concern.
It's called trust.
If my question that I asked a little while ago brought up all this argument, I'm sorry, because I'm for what the city benefits by, and I don't care if it means I'm paying more. But I still think that you have a tendency to get political anytime something comes up that should be taken care of, and then it becomes a political issue, and that I don't like. I like to have honesty and for the city.
Good point.
I don't think that's a political issue. I think differences of opinions are fine, and myself, I never like to label people as politically correct or whatever.
Call the roll, please.
We have one more. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. We're voting.
Call the roll.
Have we read the resolution?
Yeah, we've got a motion and a second. Yeah, we're ready to vote. Yeah.
Alderman Lincoln.
Yes.
Alderman Tiramidji.
I will abstain based on the reasons I explained.
Good.
Alderman Weston.
I will vote yes based on my reasons for voting yes.
Alderman Cavallaro.
Yes, and thanks to those involved.
Alderman Trowbridge.
Yes.
Alderman Allen.
Yes.
Motion's carried, Your Honor.
Read the next item.
Resolved that the engineering department draw specifications for tree removal for the city of Fulton to be returned to this council at a future meeting for the purpose of advertising for competitive bidding.
Move it.
Second.
Excuse me. Now, is this list the final list? Because I have a couple of trees that I don't see on here that I know are, dangerous in my ward.
That list that you received is are the most dangerous trees in the city. I think if you read the memo that you got with that, he had others that he could have put on that list, but these are by far the most dangerous trees in the city.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay? Yeah. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Hi, my name's Kathy Lavoti Rice, and I'm getting back to this water and sewer issue here. I'm not going to go back to directly what you said, but I had a question that came to me this morning concerning the Copper Beach Commons. I had questions concerning advertising for bids. Was there a bid advertised for sanitary sewer project there?
You mean to install the sewer?
Yes.
The sewer laterals were installed by the Water and Sewer Department.
Okay. Isn't it true as a homeowner that I have to hire a licensed plumber to have sanitary sewer lines?
That's correct.
How come then the city can install for the proper street commons?
That's a city CDA project.
In-kind services.
It's an in-kind service.
In-kind
The
service.
city had an obligation to do certain things in that area. That's one of the things.
And how come that was advertised then?
How come what was advertised?
For bids for the sanitary sewer
I
project?
don't know about that. Who advertised it? I don't know
Well,
anything.
apparently it was.
We have someone that can explain it that maybe worked on it.
Mr. Langway?
getting tired of coming up here. I'm on the Plumbing and Heating Board. My understanding is that the lateral tap-ins were done by a licensed plumber in the city of Fulton. It's also my understanding that because the amount of money charged was so minimal that it did not make economic sense to, at that point, have somebody drop specifications for something that was very simple to do that. I'm sure if there's any other questions, that's extremely public information, and I'm sure the CDA would be more than happy to explain how that took place. But it was my understanding the city really did not do that. That was done by a licensed contractor within the city of Fulton. Thank you.
They could have, but I mean, all the time they were putting in all the water lines, the city workers were there, that's what I saw, so
Right,
it
but
may be working with somebody.
The actual, it depends on what you call a lateral.
That's, I don't know what a lateral is, but they did a lot of
it
work.
really depends on the terminology.
Right.
But the city's responsible for the mains, the plumbing contractors are responsible for the tap-ins, and there certainly wasn't any big, enormous dollars spent to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Joe, it's my understanding that with that, I know that one side, they did have a plumber put it in, and the other side, from my understanding, was that the city of Fulton put it in one. And then it was brought to my attention, like I said, about bids, number one, but then two, this individual went to the city and asked to put a stop order on Friday, and the stop order was denied.
I'm not aware that Mr. Vaughn would certainly know if a stop work order was put on any project in the city.
The laterals from the building to the street property were put in by a licensed contractor who procured permits from me and was inspected and was put in properly. The work in the street was put in by the city, who has a right to put in those pipes in the street. We own the streets. It's our property right up to the property line.
So will you be willing, when my sanitary line goes, put it right up to my property and not charge me for it?
No, it's second.
If there's a sanitary sewer line,
Once it's in, it's your responsibility. Your laterals are your responsibility to the main. Yes, ma'am.
and who was the contractor that put these in?
I can't tell you off the top of my head. We have several plumbers working in the city. I would think there was 2 plumbers in Blau, Eichmann and
Cole. Vern Cole.
oh, thank you, Vern Cole. Couldn't remember the other.
I talked to Vertical, and
Yep.
that's where my concern came from.
Right, Vern Cole. I'm talking about putting the laterals from the house to the street. He put those in. So did Eichmann put it in on the other building. Yep.
Just one quick question. Is there an update on the annexation of the Volney property? How are those proceedings?
The only update I think I can give you is that the matter is now in the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Fair enough. It's proceeding to the next court.
Read the next resolution.
I think that's it.
No, you got an
Executive session.
you got an executive session.
Resolved, the Common Council hereby adjourns to executive session to discuss pending litigation.
I have a couple comments if that's the end of the meeting.
We have to come back to act on something out of,
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
so-
have a couple quick comments pertaining to the meeting. Well, one is just to commend the Boy Scout Troop 715 as a Eagle Scout project. In order to get one of the qualifications that they need for Eagle Scout, they have to plan a project. And I want to thank Dylan Ballard, whose project, in coordination with Water and Sewer Commissioner Roger Parsons, they stenciled the catch basins, indicating not to dump into those catch basins because of the drain of the river. And the other thing that I needed to do, at our last meeting, one of the things we approved was the funding. The majority of the council approved the funding for Indian Point Landing. And Alderman Termigi mentioned that he was voting no, and he wanted to say why he was voting no. And one of the reasons was that he did not want to spend the amount of money that the city was going to spend on the Indian Point landing. He would rather spend it on recreation for youth. He asked me, because the total budget cost came in less than what it was projected, how much would the city's responsibility be? The original project cost was estimated to be $100,113, of which the federal grant would fund $67,963, which was 68% of the total project cost, and the remaining $32,150 would be the City of Fulton's responsibility. Because the bid came in lower, it came in at $94,800. The federal share stayed the same at $67,963, but the city's share was reduced from $32,150 to $26,837, therefore saving us $5,314 from the original bid. Now myself, being a businessman, anytime that I get a chance to place some improvements on an area and spend at a total cost of $94,800, and that cost for the city of $26,837, I think that those kind of things the city has to take advantage of. And that only goes further to state that anytime we get a chance for grant money, we have to accept it. If we don't accept it, the next time it comes up, we're not going to be in line for it. We're not going to be on the short list. We'll be on the long list. And this kind of goes in conjunction with what we just talked about, the grant for the sewer project. So I just wanted to let the rest of the council know what that figure was.
Thank you.
If I could respond to that, since it was addressed to me, if I had $26,000 and change to spend, I certainly would want to be able to push a child in a swing that meets state code. I certainly would want to see some kids choose up on a baseball bat and start a game, or whatever, a basketball game. That's the focus of what I'm talking about. $26,000 would go a long way for a child. Thanks.
That's correct. But we're talking about the availability of $94,800. Now, you can't get that. There's other ways of doing that. And the parks are open this year. They were not open last year. They were open this year.
And they're safe.
Mr. Cooper wanted to say something before we act on the resolution.
Yeah, my name's Paul Cooper. I live at 716 Phillip Street. I brought this issue up a couple years ago, and nothing's been done about it yet. That light at Phillip and 4th, do you really think it's necessary? It's probably the only side street in this town that has a light. There's no school there. Like tonight, I got to go home now, and I got to sit there and wait for a red light. And I noticed the chief here has got some policemen watching the light because people are running it. There's no sense in even being there. I mean, it's any side street in town. You could be anywhere. I just don't see a reason for the light there. I'd like to see it taken out, maybe put a stop sign or a flashing red light, something.
I think the flashing lights, you don't like those.
Don't go with those, but we could look into it to see if it could be replaced with a stop sign.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Do you want to offer a resolution on that, to do a study, Mr. Lincoln?
I think John's probably got a little bit of background on that, haven't you?
Well, I think that nothing had been done about it up until now because Oswego County Opportunities, who was in the process of buying that building, the deal fell through. That would have generated a lot more traffic over there. I'll entertain a motion to conduct a traffic study if you like.
Well, I would like it because, it's useless being there.
You'd move a traffic study.
Second.
I'll second.
Well, one thing to consider, you have a vacant building at that location, and you do not know yet today what is going to go there. And it would be kind of remiss of the city to want to remove a traffic light and then have a commercial move into that building or whatever and have to seek to replace
2 years
it.
ago I heard the same story.
That is something to consider.
5 more years down the road, it's going to same story again?
It's up for sale now.
Well, then put a stop sign in until somebody buys it.
I think that area is zoned R2, and I don't think I don't want to misspeak, but I don't think as a matter of right you have a legal right at this moment to put a commercial venture in there.
The purchaser can go through the hoops like any other.
As long as you're talking about lights, you ought to be a light on the corner of Curtis Street and West First Street. When those kids coming out of school, you can't get across that road. It's terrible.
Yeah,
State highway.
That's why I cut down 4th. It is hysterical.
A lot of them do, but if they forget to turn down 4th, you
You're
can't get
right.
on West First Street. If you want to make a left turn, put a light there.
Thank you.
That's the state,
I have one final question. Could I please be told what the nature of the pending litigation is that we're moving to executive session? Thank you, John.
Very good. Should have read his backup.
There are...
Excuse me. Did not have that in backup. That is why I addressed the question. Thank you.
It was.
Yeah, I believe this should have been, I believe this was sent to all of the members of the council.
Sure was.
And it is in regard to an old tax certiorari case that there needs to be an amended stipulation. And there's one other tax certiorari case we need to
I don't
discuss.
have that. That's why.
Yeah, and I would assume that we would come back into regular session and act, assuming that there's some consensus reached in executive session.
I need, I don't have a vote. I got a motion and a second on the traffic study. I don't have.
We have a motion and a second on the traffic study. Let's do the traffic study. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Executive session.
Motion to go into executive session.
I'll move it.
No.
Mr. Allen,
Second.
Mrs. Trowbridge, on the motion, all in favor?
Sorry.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Adjourn from executive session into public session.
I'll move it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
I believe there's a resolution. Yeah.
Resolved that this common council hereby approves the amended stipulation of settlement and order with East Lake Apartments per memo dated September 21st, 1995, from City Attorney John T. Sullivan, Jr.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Yeah, let me just take a moment just to explain what this is all about. There have been a number of what are called tax certiorari cases, cases in which people challenge the assessment of their property. This happens to be one that had been settled. However, there was a question of the procedure on repayment. And when it was settled, the stipulation provided that the county of Oswego would pay back the owners of the East Lake Apartments the amount of back taxes which they were due under the settlement, which totaled $20,030.27. The only problem with that was the county of Oswego did not collect the total amount of back taxes due. The total amount of back taxes involved city taxes, school taxes, and county taxes, so that the aggregate amount was $20,000. Therefore, the county of Oswego objected to the stipulation. It had to go back to court. It now is in court for consideration as to whether or not we will accept a revision of the stipulation, which involves the city of Fulton paying to the property owner, in effect, a rebate of $7,446.03. The Fulton School District will be paying back $7,394.65, and the county of Oswego $5,189.59. The school district has approved it, the county has approved it, it's now on for approval by the Common Council. Basically, it's not changing the bottom line at all, it's only changing the time at which we would be paying this back. We were going to wait for a bill from the county. We are not going to do that now. We would be rebating these monies. Any questions? Okay.
Motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Entertain a motion to
Okay.
adjourn.
I'll move it.
Move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned.